Our trip began on August 20th with just over 17,000 miles on the van, a quick oil change, and then we were off for our first night in a Harvest Host location, Skyline Beer Company in Massachusetts. The van looked pretty tiny sitting out there in the parking lot. Our favorite beer was the Forget-Me-Not. It was delicious. This was the first of many love stops for the dog parks. One of our favorite thousand trails is Genesee Lakes. We got to stay 3 nights here and just enjoyed walking and seeing all the vegetation. This was a great campsite at Indiana Dunes National Park. We found some wood for sale for $20. It was a great deal. We loaded the van up. It was super hot out, but it was super buggy and we needed that fire. We spent the day hiking at the dunes. The girls really enjoyed running up the walkways and seeing who could get there first. We had spent time at the state park in previous visits. This was our first time exploring the national park area at Indiana Dunes. I think the girls thought they were at the ocean. There were small waves. We enjoyed our nights at the campground, having a campfire, drinking our favorite IPA from Indiana, Dragonfly. We were super excited to find the first Casey's of the trip and have some breakfast pizza. We made a very quick stop in Wisconsin. We found out our air conditioner would not work, and so we had to move on. It was a beautiful COE site. We were really sad to leave. Despite being in Wisconsin for a short time, we were lucky to take in the Dickeyville Grotto and Shrine. This was our second grotto that we'd been to in 2 years. This wasn't as spectacular as the Grotto of the Redemption in Iowa, but it was still very nice. We waved at Sprout as we drove through Iowa and on our way to South Dakota and to Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls was a beautiful city. We loved downtown and the Falls Park. There was plenty of green space, beautiful waterfalls, statues. The girls got to hang out in the grass. We saw Arc of Dreams in downtown Sioux Falls. We found some murals. And we finally got to see a city mural. We've been on the lookout for one for a while. The best part about having the van was being able to park downtown. We stopped for a quick view of the Cathedral of St. Joseph. We were adding more and more bugs as the miles went by. Sunflowers as far as the eye could see. We stayed at Mel Ryman COE. It was a beautiful recreation area right on the water. The sunset was spectacular that night. The next day, it was a road trip to see the largest of everything, the biggest buffalo. Taking every chance to goof around. Lily misbehaving herself. And St. James Cathedral, another basilica, famous for its stained glass. And I have to say the stained glass was spectacular in this church. We saw the biggest sandhill crane. Girls are probably wondering why we're posing with everything. We stopped at the North Dakota State Capitol. The view from the top floor was amazing. And we got to see some famous people from North Dakota. This was made out of rebar. Then we were off to the biggest cow. The biggest cow sat near the top of a big hill with really spectacular views out across North Dakota. When we were at the big cow, we met some people who said, "Don't miss the Enchanted Highway." So we added a few more hours to our day to take in the sculptures along this scenic route. And I have to say it was worth the trip. The sculptures were huge. You can see this compared to the van. And we took every opportunity to stop, get out, take a look at the sculptures, pose with them, pose the van with them. but there were bugs, lots of bugs, and we added more to the front of the van. Teddy Roosevelt. It was the second national park in our trip. We spent the first night in the parking lot. Beautiful sunset views right from the visitors center. And we woke up to bison in the parking lot. And more bison on the road trip through the park. And wild horses. Oh my God, look at them all. Sierra on wildlife alert. The drive through the park was beautiful, with lots of short 1-mile hikes with great scenery. Me and Teddy in downtown Medora. This was one of the best prairie dog towns ever. We traveled to the north section to see the Cannonball concretions. These were really cool, but overall, we much preferred the south unit. There were some spectacular views in the north unit, so it was worth the trip, but if I had only had a few days, the south is definitely the place to be.
You hear them? It sounds like Jurassic Park. I think they're going away.
It's our site.
I think they go behind our site. Oh my God. They're like in our campsite. Like, this is like 2 feet from our site. This is a little freaky. I'm just hoping he moves on.
We thoroughly enjoyed our time at Teddy Roosevelt. We spent the entire Labor Day weekend there, taking lots of short hikes, seeing lots of wildlife, and getting a little freaked out when those buffalo came through our sight. It has got to be one of our favorite national parks. Then we were off. A quick stop at Little Bighorn. Over 100 degrees this day. A quick trip through Red Lodge, Montana, on our way to Parkside Campground just before the Beartooth Highway. This is a beautiful spot. No hookups, but just a spectacular scenery.
She's having a blast. Oh my God.
We fell asleep to the babbling brook, pumped some water just before bedtime, and the next day we started on the Beartooth Highway. It was pretty overcast and it was pretty windy. And I have to say I was a little freaked out going up. It was steep and winding. And it might have been snowing. But when we got to the top and started down the other side, it cleared. And the scenery was spectacular. And the driving became much easier. Enjoying some Shih Tzu snuggles on these long driving days. And just like that, we were through the Beartooth Highway and at our campground at Soda Butte, just before Cook City, and entering Yellowstone National Park. We were thoroughly enjoying listening to our guide-along guy tell us about the sights to see and driving through Lamar Valley. We had a big storm move through and we had to wait it out before continuing on with the sights. The van got to drive through the Roosevelt Arch near Gardner, Montana. The drive into the park on day 2 brought us through the Misty Valley, which just added to the scenery, on our way to hike through the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. We parked the van that day and we walked 5 miles of trails and took in every scenic viewpoint along the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. This was our second trip to Yellowstone, and I think we preferred the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone to the geysers on this trip. We even spotted our first yellow-bellied marmot of the trip, then to see some geysers and boiling mud pots.
And it stinks. Dragon's mouth. And it's got bubbling mud in there.
Old Faithful Inn, and a day to explore the geysers. We absolutely love the pools. Morning Glory Pool. The landscape is just amazing here. We watched a few geysers go off. And then we hiked up to the Old Faithful viewing area to look down on Old Faithful and the geyser going off. This was a great viewpoint. And then it was off to camping Grand Teton, and this was in our site at the National Park Campground. We got up really early the next morning and drove into the park at sunrise. We wanted to be there nice and early to get a good parking spot so we could take the boat across Jenny Lake to the hike up to Inspiration Point and beyond into Cascade Canyon. We knew the girls were waiting for us, so we hurried our way along, but I think we had more time and we wished we had hiked deeper into the canyon. But the views were still amazing. After the hike, we took the girls to the Mama Mimi statue and to get a little hiking in. The next day, it was back to Yellowstone, Grand Prismatic. This is one of the prettiest pools there is. And then a little hike to Fairy Falls, where John met a new friend. It was a tiny waterfall, but it was a really good hike. We were tired of the parking situation in the national parks, and so we headed off towards Idaho, towards Quake Lake, and we hiked to Refugee Point, and then we went and visited the Visitors Center at Quake Lake and learned about how the earthquake had changed the direction of the river. Then we were off to Idaho and the Targhee National Forest to take in Upper Mesa Falls. This is a great area. There are boardwalks for hiking, it's dog friendly, and the viewpoints of the falls are amazing. This was probably one of the highlights of the trip. We would definitely go here again. After the falls, we were on our way to Big Springs National Landmark. It was an easy dirt road, and we got to see the biggest trout, and we got to see moose, a mama and baby moose. Just a nice low-key day.
I think we wore the girls out tonight. Poor Lily looks so tired. Oh, they love the chairs.
The next day we headed towards Glacier. There had been wildfires in the area, but made the sky spectacular. We drove through a really cute town called Ennis. There were trout sculptures in the town, and it was just very eclectic. And we spent the night at Chateau Mountain View Campground and had one of the best sunsets of the trip. The sky was absolutely on fire. The next day we arrived at Glacier National Park. Right away we had our first bear sighting. And then we entered into the Many Glacier entrance, parked the camper, and immediately got hiking. We had limited time. We knew we had a lot of hikes we wanted to do, so we were off to Iceberg Lake. And it was hot, and it was in the full sun, but it was beautiful. There were no icebergs left in Iceberg Lake because it was in September, but it was still stunning. and everything about the hike was what you would expect from Glacier. Alpine meadows, mountain lakes. There were even some leftover wildflowers. Not a bad first day, but there was more to come. Despite the wildfires still being in the area, we were up early and over at the Many Glacier Lodge, which was absolutely spectacular. We opted not to take the boat shuttle across because that first part of the trail to the glacier is flat, and the scenery was actually beautiful. We made our way quickly to the end of the next lake, and then we started the climb, and we watched the sun rise repeatedly from behind the mountains, and we started to get glimpses of this alpine lake that we hiked up and around and up and up, and the views became more and more spectacular. And then we arrived at Grinnell Glacier, and we were able to see ice chunks in the lake, and we were able to see the glacier. This had been on our bucket list for years. Little chipmunk greeting, and then it was time to head down. I'd like to say the trip down was easy, but there was a lot of loose rocks, and our feet were tired, and it was a long trudge down the mountain. But we were done by 1:30. We saw bighorn sheep in the parking lot, and we had another big hiking day. We woke to rain and fog the next day, which kind of forced us into having a down morning at least, and we drove to the visitor center and used some Wi-Fi and rested up before an evening hike out to Red Rock Lake. It was about 4 miles round trip, but it was beautiful. You can definitely see how the lake gets its name. The next day we decided to hike to Ptarmigan Tunnel. We saw some grouse on the way, and we thought the rain would hold off, but it didn't. It started to pour halfway into the hike. Maybe it wasn't even halfway, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained as we climbed up and up and up. And by the time we got to the tunnel, we were wet, and we were cold, and we were pretty miserable. And then there were clouds as you looked out to the other side of the tunnel. And then the sun started coming out, and then the rainbow started to come. And all of a sudden, that hike became worth it. And in fact, turned out to be the best hike we did in Glacier National Park and the best hike of our trip. The hike down was easy. We got to take in the views. And we were pretty proud of ourselves for hiking well over 30 miles in 4 days at Glacier National Park. And we were treated to a beautiful sunset in our campsite. We decided to drive the Going to the Sun Road with the van. We figured, hey, we had done the Beartooth Highway, how hard could it be? The thing is, there's no turning around. There's no place in any of the viewpoints that are big enough for the van to turn around, so we were committed. And the drop-offs, well, they're pretty extreme. But I think it would have been just as tough in a truck. It was kind of a cloudy, rainy day, but it was still beautiful. Something I'm glad that we did once. We didn't take one of these cars, we took the van. So I'm glad I saw it once, but I don't think we'd drive it again. And we ended the day at Lake McDonald and finished up Glacier National Park, and we were all pretty tired.